Breaking nuclear news. Let's start with price action. The Sprott Uranium Miners ETF down 5% on the week. Compare that to the broader market sell-off. NASDAQ down 2%. So all assets, including earlier stage, higher upside assets, all crashing together. Uranium underperforming this week, but overall showing consistent strength, at least throughout the last few months we've been covering it. In fact, if you look at the Sprott Uranium Miners ETF over the last 5 years, it's up 144%. Compare that to the NASDAQ, which is only up 56%. And then obviously you do have the uranium spot price just outperforming most other asset classes in the last 2 years or so. The uranium spot price up 94%. There's an absolutely strong floor right now underneath that price, and it's obviously outperforming the rest. And you can get exposure to this through the Sprott Uranium Physical Trust, which continues to stack uranium. They've even raised more money to buy more physical uranium off the market in the midst of a severe supply deficit. Sprott issued 245,000 physical uranium trust units to raise $3 million. Obviously, they're raising money for a reason. They're going to take more off the market. You don't only have the Sprott Uranium Trust buying uranium off the market, you also have the United States government supporting the spot price. Tomorrow, the U.S. Department of Energy is introducing a plan to procure 25 metric tons of uranium per year for 6+ years from newly mined uranium enrichment in the USA. And so you have all these players scooping up as much physical uranium as possible right now. That's the supply side. We know it's severely constrained. Let's dive through the demand side of uranium. Obviously, you have to stay on top of the supply and the demand. We have this report from Brookfield, a new dawn for nuclear power. Nuclear capacity doubles in the pathway to net zero globally. So you can just see that emerging and developing economies in blue, as well as China, are the biggest sources of growth. G7 members not factoring in a lot of growth here, but that is all subject to change as well. But this space is absolutely growing in the long term, period. The demand for uranium is going to skyrocket. And this is where we stand currently with which countries are building out nuclear infrastructure for the long term. So obviously China, Russia, India investing heavily into it. Then you do have the UK, you do have the US, G7 members growing and building. And obviously we're still in the early stages of the nuclear renaissance. We'll dive through the stories of all the growing nuclear reactor builds that are happening around the world that aren't even priced into today's models. And as an early stage investor, that's what you want to do. You want to front run the positive news that aren't priced in yet to the current picture and get in before the price discovery happens. And so we've covered how Japan is massively expanding its nuclear infrastructure, restarting essentially all of its idle nuclear capacity. And so you can see where we're coming from. In 2010, we had huge nuclear growth, about a quarter of Japan's energy mix. That crashed down to 0%. Well, that's about to exceed where it was in 2010 as they continue to build out their infrastructure. And you keep getting bullish surprises to the upside for uranium demand. Japan weighs scrapping 60-year life limit for nuclear reactors. Again, all these models that exist right now for future demand do not factor in surprising developments like this. Japan weighs scrapping 60-year life. And that's going to be the story everywhere. So whatever model is factoring in all these plants shutting down just doesn't quite understand yet, it seems, where the psychology is. Conclusion: nuclear power is riding tremendous tailwinds. Demand for clean energy is growing rapidly, while the importance of energy security has assumed a central position on the world stage. Policymakers and investors are increasingly recognizing nuclear's role in reaching net zero by 2050. We've covered the wall of money coming in. We've covered the global elite supporting nuclear, but let's dive into more news. How many industries right now with sky high interest rates where no one can obtain any financing because it's too expensive, the entire tech industry struggling, mergers and acquisitions, private equity takeovers, venture capital, all plummeting. Money does not exist. How many industries have booming M&A activity? The only one that I can think of is uranium. Cameco pivots off volatile uranium market with a big bet on Westinghouse. Cameco is investing $2.2 billion for a 49% stake in Westinghouse Electric, which services nuclear reactors. Westinghouse Electric services about half the nuclear energy technology and infrastructure around the globe. Cameco just expanding into nuclear infrastructure prior to the real nuclear renaissance taking off, seeing this as an early stage opportunity to invest in the nuclear renaissance. A massive deal for Cameco as they try to compete and take advantage of the void that is being left by Russia's Rosatom, which has the same concept, providing infrastructure for a huge chunk of the world's nuclear infrastructure. Well, maybe now there's a void since the world is trying to move away from Russian assets and use. And so clearly Cameco is extremely bullish on the future of nuclear power, and they're trying to get in early. But that's not the only massive deal that happened. Again, this is a thriving space, more so than most other high growth fields. Uranium Energy Corp, UEC, acquires Rough Rider property, Rio Tinto. And so UEC just acquiring assets. This is a North American based uranium company. And obviously, they see the wall of money pouring in from the US government and investors around the world. They want to capitalize on that. And so then we have this from CNBC. Not only do we have just naturally bullish supply demand fundamentals, but you do have the geopolitical disturbances where one of the biggest sources of uranium fuel, Russia, is seen as the enemy of the world. But since we're so addicted to their fuel source, the West has not sanctioned any uranium, which speaks to how significant this trade is. Europe is still quietly importing Russian nuclear energy. Russia's nuclear fuel industry remains conspicuously untouched by European sanctions more than 7 months into the Kremlin's war in Ukraine. Despite 8 rounds of sanctions, shipments of nuclear fuel to EU member states continues to make their way from Russia. The EU Sustainable Finance Manager and environmental group Greenpeace told CNBC that it is absolute madness for the bloc to continue bankrolling the Kremlin by ignoring Russian nuclear trade. So she just doesn't understand how desperate the world is for uranium and why Western countries are going to invest heavily into their own nuclear infrastructure. And so with that, let's dive into the massive nuclear renaissance unfolding before our very eyes. The French National Commission for Public Debate has announced it is relaunching a consultation on the Georges uranium enrichment plant to consider increasing the plant's capacity. So obviously France trying to increase its nuclear build out. Sweden's incoming cabinet says new reactors will be built. Domestic energy supplies are a priority amid global crisis. You even have the influential environmentalists who many people seek guidance from. Greta Thunberg breaks ranks from the German Green Party and urges Germany not to shut down nuclear power plants. This is the logical conclusion. Worldwide 180-degree pivots back into uranium. Francis Le Maire, priority is to restart nuclear reactors as soon as possible. In West Virginia, House Speaker touts nuclear option for West Virginia amid transition from coal. Obviously, these guys are investing in small modular reactor technology. Just another reason why the nuclear renaissance is going to unfold with lightning speed exponentially because it's enabled by this new technology. Uganda seeks investors in a nuclear plant that may cost $9 billion. This would be the first nuclear power plant in East Africa. So we'll stay on top of that. Obviously, they want in UK nuclear body back small modular reactor plant in Wales. And so, again, the landscape is absolutely shifting. You have this mass adoption at the same time that you have revolutionary small modular reactor technology that's going to enable it. It is the perfect storm for this industry to spread like wildfire. And so we're seeing the world wake up to the revolutionary use cases of this technology. We have mass adoption. You have this from terrestrial energy. The case is compelling that nuclear hydrogen with natural gas pyrolysis is the golden key to a clean green future. And so we can compare across the various types of energy fuel, right? How much does it cost to produce a kilogram of hydrogen? Solar is the most expensive. Wind is the next. And then you have natural gas, and then you have nuclear generation and advanced nuclear generation, obviously beating everything else. And so this is not limited to hydrogen power production. This could be limited to water desalination or to any need for energy. So we will continue to stay on top of this market as the massive nuclear renaissance just continues.